The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. This is Bob Drakowski, and it's a pleasure to have you join us today. We look forward to sharing with you how to create your Revenue Acceleration Playbook. Whether we call this a playbook, whether we call this a roadmap or a blueprint, it's really the same, which is a strategic view, a strategic plan on how you're going to create revenue moving forward. And so what we want to do is walk you through what goes into a playbook, why you would need a playbook, and then also walk you through a customer example. I think it'll be really helpful to see an example of one of our clients and how we've collaborated with them to actually not only create the playbook, but implement the playbook and gain the results. So again, we welcome all your questions today. We are going to be recording today's webinar. In the event that you'd like to share the recording with colleagues or other folks that you have on your board or investors, please do that. Now, the one thing about the playbooks that we'll talk about today is that we've actually created hundreds of these playbooks, and they really are strategic in terms of their value. They really do give you a definitive roadmap together with best practices on how to scale revenue so your revenue growth is predictable, it's intentional, and it's consistent. But the other thing that we found is it's not only helpful to have a playbook internally with your management team, but it's also very important to have one in the event you want to go raise money, whether it be investors, VCs, or PEs, private equity firms. Because many of the CEOs that I've worked with have taken the playbook to share that with when they're raising rounds of capital, because a lot of times investors are looking for how are you going to utilize that incoming $2 million or $5 million of investment to actually grow the company and scale and be successful. So this is really a blueprint internally and externally, but it has many different types of value. So again, thank you for joining us today, and let's get started. Good place to start, I think, always is asking a question from you. So wanted to get your opinion and give us your response. So we really appreciate it every time when you get a chance to respond. But when you think about a revenue acceleration playbook, one of the questions is, do you have one in place today? So some of the answers are no, I don't. So we do not. Another one would be that perhaps you have a sales plan and a assigned quota to the sales team. You may say, yes, I do have a revenue acceleration playbook in place today, which would be great. Fourth option is maybe you don't know what goes into a playbook, which obviously we're going to explain today. And the last one is we have the what, but not the how. So it's not unusual that many cases we know what we want to achieve. We just don't have a detailed, definitive, actionable plan to actually get there. So good. So thank you for participating, and I'm going to share the results as I do each and every time with our audience so that you can see the responses. But it's always good to have everybody participate and to weigh in. So we appreciate your advice here. Okay, I'll just keep the poll open for just a couple more seconds, and then we'll show the results. Okay. Let me go ahead and close the poll and share the results with everybody. So 40% of you stated that you do not have a revenue acceleration playbook. Another 40% stated that you have obviously a sales plan and assigned quotas. And then 20%, you're not really sure what goes into the playbook. So it's a good setup for our conversation today. So thank you for participating in that poll. A little bit of background on on-demand advisors. So when you think about on-demand advisors, you could think about revenue on demand, because that's really what we're doing. We're helping companies really from an advisory and execution perspective be able to achieve great success in the revenue growth area. So Craig and I did found this company, this agency, I should say, uh, 14 years ago. Prior to that, I was a serial CEO for both public and private companies in Silicon Valley. Um, Craig is a serial chief marketing officer for both public and private companies. And for instance, together, one of the companies that we led is a company called Intact, a SaaS, software as a service cloud company focused on financial management solutions. And we had tremendous success scaling that. We built an operating system at the time that we implemented at Intact, and it was very successful. Not only did we scale half of our revenue on the direct side, but half of it came from the channel and the indirect side as well. So that company was acquired by the Sage Group for $850 million. But we just really, we found that our passion is to help you be successful in scaling revenue. I know that many of the entrepreneurs, CEOs, chief executives that we've worked with, if you look at bringing something to market, creating a solution, creating a service, that's a little bit of the easier part because there's some different pathways to get from here to there. The challenge for many executives is having a demonstrable, proven way to scale revenue growth. And that's really what we're talking about today. And we've embodied that into what we call a playbook. So we are a strategic revenue acceleration partner with the companies we work with. Some of the things that are important when you think about revenue is being intentional. Where do you want the revenue to come from? You want to be able to be a metrics-driven, data-driven organization, and you want to be strategic in terms of your approach to revenue creation. It also needs to be tailored to your needs. So it's not a one-size-fits-all because every company is different in terms of the markets you go after, the solutions and services that you sell, and then also the team that you have that you possess to execute your strategy. The other thing about an approach, it needs to be proven. It needs to be capital efficient. A lot of executives that I work with spend many years experimenting and trying out different things. But it's kind of like going to Las Vegas and betting on the roulette wheel. A lot of times the house wins and you may not. So in this case, what you're really looking for is something that's very capital efficient so that you don't have the opportunity cost of time and money that is lost through that experimentation process. And then finally, it needs to be comprehensive. Revenue and creating revenue is a connected process. Just like every other process that underpins the business that you run today, the revenue creation process is a connected process. So when one thing is out of sync or one thing is not working, it stops you from moving the process forward to actually scale that revenue. Now, one of the questions that we get asked very often is, does this work for small companies? Does it work for large companies? And the answer is yes. We work with hundreds of B2B companies. And another question that we often get asked as we talk about having a playbook, a blueprint, a roadmap, if you will, is having the resources internally to get the job done. So as we all know, a lot of times you can have a great plan, but you've got to be able to execute the plan. So when we work with a company like, let's say, an ICUC, which is a global leader in social media management services, they already had a significant team in place. They just weren't scaling to the level and growing revenue at 50% year over year that they wanted to. So we partnered and collaborated with their team to actually help them achieve that goal. Another client, though, is a situation where we worked with Avid Exchange in Charlotte. And at the time we began working with them, they really didn't have anyone in marketing. So we actually did all of the marketing for them, tactical and strategic marketing, and many other things that we worked with them on. But in this case, it was about getting the job done. So rest assured, when we built On-Demand Advisors, we actually have teams that we work with our clients focused on marketing, sales enablement, partnering, and strategic alliances, as well as strategy. So a question for today's webinar is, why do you need a revenue acceleration playbook? So what's the key here? Well, what I found for many companies, and this is especially true in fourth quarter, um, in your fiscal fourth quarter, if you will, is that there's a number. We all want to increase revenue by a number. So we may say, or we may sit down with the chief financial officer and say, let's increase revenue by 30% year over year, which is not unusual for companies to do that. The challenge a lot of times is it's not the number. The number is actually the easy part. It's easy for us to say 20%, 50%, 100%. What is important though is the how. How do we get from here to there? And that's really the essence of the playbook. It's a definitive plan to move you from where you are today to achieving that success. Once you're able to apply this playbook, though, in your company and in your career, you'll want a playbook each and every time wherever you are. So the other thing about a playbook is it needs to be tailored to your company, to your unique situation. One of the things we all want to do is leverage best practices and eliminate costly experimentation, as we talked about earlier. And the reason why we help companies create these playbooks is because we are strategic in terms of understanding the business through your eyes. Since, for instance, for myself, I've helped build 10 B2B companies at different stages of growth, from large public companies to small companies where I helped them from zero revenue go from $0 to $100 million in 2 years. And you can do this, but you do need a plan, and you need to look at the best practices to get from here to there. So these would be some reasons why you would want to have a revenue acceleration playbook. Okay, I hope that's helpful. Let's look at the areas that go into building this playbook. And they're substantial, and I'm going to walk you through each one of these as well as an example. The first is defining your revenue goals and strategic goals. So they go hand in hand. The second is creating your revenue engineering model. In other words, what kind of revenue do we want to create in which areas? The third area is assessing your current state of operations. The fourth is having a revenue growth practices, looking at what those best practices are and where you have gaps. And then the fifth area is the plan, is the playbook. Obviously, after that, we've got to implement the playbook, and then you've got to achieve success. So let's take time and walk through each area. Okay, the first area is strategy. This is probably the area that most people skip over quickly, but it's probably the most important area to spend time when you're thinking about your revenue growth and what you want to achieve. When you think about revenue growth, like we talked about, it's more than a number. So a lot of times we'll start with, what's the type of year-over-year revenue growth that we want? Let's say it's 30%. That's not unusual. And then you look at that and say, well, where did that come from? So for instance, we worked with one management team and spent a half a day with that team, really thinking through where they wanted that growth to come from, because they hadn't taken it to that granular level. Since they were pursuing 4 different markets, 4 different industries, they were looking for the contribution from each of those industries. Another thing that's important is, what are truly the markets that you want to win? That gets down to intentionality. You also want to look at what's your target mix that you want. For instance, one of the clients that we're working with provides solutions that include hardware, software, and services. Each of those components have different mixes, different margins. And so if we're trying to optimize around certain profitability goals, we need to look at what's the right mix. And then another thing is, you'll also hear this thing called ICP, which is your ideal customer profile. Who are the best companies to target? And another good thing I always look at in a playbook is, where do you want to be 3 years from now? So the playbook isn't just about what we're going to do, let's say, together in 2024. It's about, what do you want to do in 2025, 2026? And then finally, underpinning all of this from a strategic goal perspective is, what's going to make your company valuable? A lot of times when we work with owners and operators, the key there is looking at sometime down the road, if they would be acquired, what would make their company valuable? Well, I can tell you having a proven scalable system to grow revenue is really going to be attractive to anybody in the future because people are looking for certainty. They're looking eliminating the risk, and they're looking at some predictable patterns to take your business model forward. The second area is metrics. So as you can see on this slide, we're talking about including 5 different areas that you can actually grow revenue in. So 5 different routes, as I call them. The first route is new customer acquisition, going out, finding new customers, and really doing that in such a way that it can be based upon your solution or services, that you're going after that from different markets or industries, or that you're looking at certain titles or personas that you're going to attract for your service or solution. Another route to revenue that we often work with clients is helping them with their customer or client upsell and cross-sell. So there's always a possibility for a bigger solution than you have today, additional services, enablement, other partner services, and then really looking at how you're going to take that to market, the bigger footprint in terms of, I call it seats to suites, if you will. We're looking at another third area, which is a partner ecosystem. As I shared with you when Craig and I were at Intact, we drove half of our revenue through partnerships, and that was very significant. A fourth area that we look at as far as engineering your revenue outcomes is new solutions, new services you're going to bring to market, and then finally, maybe better bundles. So here's what we look at in many cases when we talk about engineering revenue growth in your playbook. Here's a great example. If you wanted to actually engineer new customer acquisitions and your typical transaction or new opportunity value is $100,000, well, pretty simply, we need 40 of those this year. And so what we're doing here is we're thinking through strategically, what do we need to do to engineer funnels 1, 2, and 3? So the first one is marketing. The second one is taking those marketing leads and converting them into sales qualified leads. And then the final is your CRM funnel, taking sales qualified leads to close. But this is really important because the playbook needs to help you achieve these engineered values consistently. And you can see we've broken this down on a monthly basis as well. Okay. Another one is current customer expansion. I'm amazed at the opportunity that there is within current customers that you have today for new services, for extensions, for expansion. There's just tremendous opportunity. It's probably the number one area that is least mined when you're working with clients today. And the third area is channel partnerships. So channel partnerships can be fantastic if they're set up correctly. And that's really thinking about channel partnerships. Most people have opportunistic channel partners. What they don't have is what we call proactive channel partners, which are partners that are going to help you drive revenue growth with the same velocity and consistency as you would do internally. So anyway, that's the first part here that we talked about, which is being intentional. Now, the third area that we look at when we're creating a playbook is what's in state today? What's your current operations? So what's in place today? How are you providing your solutions and services? What markets and buyers are you targeting? Who's your customer base? What kind of marketing and sales operations do you have in place today, as well as business development? And then what challenges do you have for growth? This is really great because if you're looking for strategic advice when you're putting together a playbook, you want that group to fully understand where you've been, where you are, and where you're going. That way, nothing gets lost in the translation. And so we find that being able to assess that is excellent because that's where you set your benchmark. Now, once you have your benchmark when you're developing your playbook, the next thing is to look at where there are gaps. So think about your current practices and think about comparing them against your best practices. So if you know what the revenue growth best practices are, you can easily understand where the gaps are. And so we've created a revenue acceleration system, which I'm going to show you on the next slide, that embodies those best practices. And what we're really looking for is identifying any gaps that you have, either in the revenue creation process, lack of resources, lack of underpinning technology, and then maybe lack of competency. So what you're really looking for in this fourth area is understanding gaps. And then this is something you may have seen if you've been at our webinars before. You'll notice that there is a set of revenue acceleration best practices. So the purple is strategic. It's how do you engineer the revenue growth. The red is marketing. The yellow is sales execution. And the green is partnerships. But imagine the tremendous power there is behind each of these little icons here in terms of the best practices that underpin each area. This is something that we've developed over many years. We perfected with many clients, and you are the recipient of that as we're discussing that today. So if you think about it, the what is, it's your current state. The to be is the business practices you want to put in place to get to the level of achievement and revenue growth that you're looking for in the future. So the next step in this process is presenting the playbook and the recommendations. So what's the optimal state for your company that you want to be at this year, next year, and the following year? And then having a very detailed plan on how to get from here to there. Most of this work, by the way, is transformational. It's interesting because when we work with any client, often the tenure that we have is 3 to 4 years when we work with a client. And when they look back on it, they do achieve the revenue growth results they're looking for, but they also say that the role that we played with them was catalytic. It was transformational. It helped them move from where they were to a strategic overview of where they are today. The sixth part of the playbook, obviously, is the implementation. Really having a detailed plan, statement of work, understanding the KPIs, having governance and feedback, and really establishing a cadence of a weekly, monthly, quarterly review, and seeing before your eyes the real-time transformation of your company. And then most importantly, number 7 is the strategic goals and making sure that your objectives have been addressed that you set out in the playbook. And what's interesting about putting in your revenue growth plan is there are certain things you can get done in year 1. There are certain things you want to get done in year 2 and year 3 and so forth. And so one of the things that we think about when we help our clients create their revenue acceleration playbook is being mindful of investments, being mindful of where they're at, and being mindful of what can truly be accomplished this year and then next year and so forth. Okay, let's look at an example. And by the way, we're going to show you a real example today. We've changed the company to Vino Solutions, and that's just meant to be a name to present as this company. But this is a current customer of ours. It's a current example. And we just wanted to make sure that we weren't disclosing any type of confidential information in this process. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. So your revenue acceleration playbook. So the playbook, when we work with a client to create the playbook, and there's typically 3 of us that are involved in creating the playbook. There's myself from a strategic perspective. There's Craig from a marketing best practices perspective. There's Dale McConnell from a sales best practices perspective. And then we're typically really involved heavily in this collaborative process with the management team. So the first thing that we're looking at is just a snapshot of where you are. That could be from solutions, what's Vina's solutions partners, solutions that they offer, competition, customers. What do they do today in marketing and sales and business development? and what are the challenges that they have. Then we look at the strategic goals. Then we look at what needs to happen to engineer the revenue growth results that they're looking for. How do you engineer the buyer's journey? And then finally, what's the plan and how do you put this in place? So in this playbook here for Vina, we went through and we really did under an NDA a true deep dive in terms of everything that they've done, what they've accomplished, what the results were, where they're at today, and what they were thinking about in the future. And you do that by looking at the target markets that they have. You do that looking at their revenue that they have as far as revenue mix. And you look at their partnerships, you look at the marketing and sales team that they have in place, customer success, and then challenges to growth. Every company has challenges to grow. And we all hit ceilings, and you've got to break through those ceilings. So these were some of the challenges they had in terms of growing revenue. In their case, some of the demand generation campaigns just were not effective. They weren't. They had too much dependency on one person, their VP of sales, and you could see some of the challenges that they had. Okay. Now, when we sat down with the management team and we looked at some of their goals, one of the goals that they had is they wanted to grow revenue by 33% year over year. So that was something that, by the way, we helped them do. So we helped them achieve that goal. And what's really interesting now for this company is we're actually helping them put in a strategic 5-year plan to go from where they're at to $25 million. So success begets success, if you will. Another goal that they had was to put in world-class marketing and branding. And so Craig has worked with their team and worked with their company to actually do that. He's just tremendous at branding. He's tremendous in terms of projecting the strength and the strategic value of that organization. And that really has turned this company around. One of the things we also look at is when you're in some markets, do you have a competing or winning strategy? So one of the things that we want to look at in this playbook is what we're doing today with them, which is helping them win some of the markets that they're in. And there is a methodology to go do that. Another thing that we look at is the buyer's journey. So when somebody comes to you, somebody comes to your website, somebody engages sales, somebody engages in one way, shape, or form through your campaigns, what they're really looking for is they have a journey that they want to go through. And how do you enable that journey, both online and offline? And so that's really important in terms of what we're doing for this company. We also think about best practices throughout the organization: sales, marketing, business development, customer success. And then another thing that we're going to help this company do is put in what we call a sales-driven website. That is really the frictionless way to drive the buyers, your visitors, to your website through the buying process to be very efficient. So what we're looking for is velocity, efficiency, and we want to take the buyer through all of the upfront education, all the preference setting before they engage with your sales team. At that point, this could be either a strategic sale or a transactional sale. If it's a transactional sale, we can do that on the website. Now, they also have strategic partnerships that need to be blossomed and further cultivated, and so forth. So I won't spend all time going through all of the goals that they have, but this was key. The third part of the Revenue Acceleration Playbook for this client was doing what we call revenue engineering. So as we talked about, we've got 3 funnels. The first one is marketing, lead generation. The second one is lead development, developing that lead to be a sales opportunity. And the third is taking that sales opportunity to close. So what we broke down is we looked at some of the markets that they focus on. For instance, one of the markets that they focus on is franchise. So franchise organizations. So what we're doing with them today is helping them create 160 new franchise customers each and every year, and so forth. So when you start looking at the metrics, you start understanding on a monthly basis what needs to happen for your client. Okay. And so we've done all the revenue engineering with our client here. We looked at the mix. Now this is very interesting. All of you today that are joining our webinar have a sales process. But on that sales process, mapped to that is the buying process or the buyer's journey. So what we wanted to do in our playbook here is really think through what is the buyer's journey. And you can see on here, we start with one, which is awareness. We go through understanding what are the business challenges that Vino solves and addresses. We talk about that, and then we move forward to qualifying to see if there's a good fit here, providing the proof that's required, converting to action, so the desire is converted into action, and then the close. And so this is really great when you start looking at the world through the buyer's eyes, because the more that you can actually guide the buyer through the buying process, A, the happier the buyer is going to be, and B, the happier you're going to be because you're accelerating that sales process with your buying community. So this is something that really gets mapped in the playbook that is highly beneficial, because what you want to look at, for instance, at these different stages is what are the things that you need to enable, for instance, when you're going through the discovery and qualification steps. How are we going to qualify that? And if you're going to prove that you can address those needs, what are the things that you're going to need? Well, you're probably going to need a solution overview for your market. You're going to need explainer demonstrations for that market. You may even need weekly webinars. You're going to need an ROI, cost justification guide. You may need a buyer's guide, and you may need, obviously, success stories. So one of the things that we think through when we're thinking about a playbook is what do you need to do to facilitate the sales journey and the buyer's journey? And then finally in the playbook, the fifth area is what are the recommendations? So what are we going to do in year one? What are we going to do in year two, in year three, and so forth? Because, when you're thinking about eating an elephant, you can only eat the elephant one bite at a time, as they say. And so in this case, what we're looking at is creating a plan and putting that plan in place. So you can see there's a lot of work that's gone into this playbook. So the first thing that we did with our client is really help them put in their plan to win the franchise market. And if you joined us for putting in what we call this revenue acceleration engine with other clients, you'll know that there are 9 different components that we help clients put in. This represents the best practices to scale the engine. And so that's exactly what we did with the client. Once we did this, we turned to another market, which is nonprofit diocese, to do the same thing. And as you can see here, we've identified the different stakeholders: the franchise owner, what's their drivers, the franchise CFO, the accounting manager, the VP of franchise operations, the franchisee. And so what we're doing here is we're doing a really good job thinking through the different audiences and the drivers for each of those audiences. So this is in essence the playbook that gets developed. And as you can see, it's pretty significant. I think this playbook is about, in length, about 40 pages. But I wanted to share with you, at least give you an idea of what goes into a playbook, because it's very strategic in terms of what you're thinking about. Okay. Now, one of the questions that we are often asked is, what's the process to create a playbook? So typically, when we engage to help a client create a playbook, it requires their time, obviously our time. So in week zero, if you will, at the beginning, we've got to put in a statement of work. We have to look at what are the current ways that that solution or service is presented to prospects. How is that information shared? And then what we do is we step into conversations in each area. One is strategy. So really talking about strategically where you are and where you're going. The next week is focusing on marketing. What are you doing today in marketing? What are you trying to accomplish in marketing? What results are you getting? The same as sales. How are you selling today? How successful is your team selling? Um, what's missing in that sales process? What tools do you use to enable the sales process? The fourth week is focused on ecosystem. What is your partner ecosystem? Now, what's interesting here is even if you don't sell through partners, there is an ecosystem of potential partnerships that you can leverage in each and every market that you go after. And then week 5 is when we take time to create the playbook based upon all this information and then present that playbook and best practices roadmap to the team. So that's essentially the process that we go through. So wanted to take everybody through that, and obviously love to hear your questions that you have as far as a playbook and how that gets put in place. But it is really a strategic asset that you could think about in terms of where you are and where you're going. Let me go ahead now and see if we can have another poll, and appreciate your thoughts on this. So in terms of just what we talked about today, I'm always interested in your takeaway from today's webinar. So what was your major takeaway from today? As you look at a playbook, and by the way, we can send you how we help clients create playbooks and the infographic that we talked about. Were you really coming here to determine just how to engineer your revenue growth? So you looked at the 3 funnels, and we walked you through that. And so that's a great way to think about how you're going to engineer your revenue growth and through revenue engineering, from marketing to lead development to sales for each and every market that you're going after, or for each and every solution that you have. The second takeaway may be that you want to expand on your strategy and strategic goals. As I mentioned earlier during the webinar, a lot of times it's the area that we skip over the most, but it's the area we could be most mindful for in terms of being intentional about what we want as far as outcomes. The third takeaway that you can have is, a desire to create your own revenue acceleration playbook. And we'd love to help you facilitate that process so that you really do have a definitive best practices roadmap on how you're going to move forward with your company and revenue growth. The fourth is learning more about these best practices. And the fifth is just a desire, as a follow-up to today, to set up a time to discuss your needs and goals. But we are tremendously excited that you joined us today. We are also excited in terms of sharing revenue growth best practices and how to accelerate that. So for instance, for many companies, the goal may be, let's say 20% growth, revenue growth year over year. But if you're like me, the question that's in the back of your mind is, could we do more? Could we do better? Could we accelerate this? And instead of doing 20%, could we do 35%? And if so, what would we have to do differently to get from here to there? Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to close our poll, and I'm going to show the results and share. Okay, so here's the results. So 50% of you that answered the poll are basically looking for determining how to engineer your revenue growth going forward, which is great. 17% of you would like to expand on your strategy and strategic goals. Another 17% would like to create your playbook. And finally, another 17 would like to look at learning more about revenue acceleration best practices. So thank you for participating on that. That's fantastic. We will be following with everybody with recording of today's webinar after today. And we also will be sharing with you the playbook construct that we went through today in terms of being able to do this. Okay, what we want to do right now is open this up for questions and answers. So please, if you'd be kind enough, go ahead and post what questions that you have, and we can cover that. And let me just go ahead and pull up some questions now. Okay, um, let's see. Okay, the first question is, well, one of the questions is, how much does a playbook cost? As you would expect, there's a lot of time over that 6 to 8 week uh, collaborative process that we're going to invest in creating the playbook with our clients. Now, for those of you that have joined us today, and this will be true we'll provide this on a 30-day offer, limited time offer. Normally, to create the playbook is $15,000. But for those of you that have joined us, if you actually engage with us to create your playbook within the next 30 days, we'll take that price and it will be $10,000 instead. So just want to add a real incentive for you to do that. But it will be some of the best money you've ever spent, because you're going to get some of the serial strategic minds around the table to look at your business and determine what's the best way to engineer your revenue growth. Okay. Here's another question. How long does it take? As I mentioned, it does take about 6 to 8 weeks from start to finish to do this. And we want to take our time and be thorough. You really want to have this playbook to stand the test of time, if you will. Okay. Keep posting those questions. Here's a question from Douglas. If you're starting from a smaller revenue number, is more aggressive growth reasonable in the first few years? The answer is yes. You should be looking at substantial growth in the first few years. It's not unusual for companies to double revenue growth year over year when they have a smaller base. So good question, Douglas, in terms of kind of thinking through how to think about doing this. Okay. But one of the things I would also share with you, and this is kind of an important point, and that is one of the most important things you can do is, when you're a small company, even a startup company, is to do it right. Because here you have the opportunity to be capital efficient and to lay track for the railroad before you're actually traversing on the railroad. If you've already been in business, let's say for 20 years, you've already got a model built. The question is it effective? Does it need to be transformed, evolved, and so forth? So this is really important in terms of being able to get that type of insight and perspective. Let's see. Here's another question. If I don't have the resources to execute the playbook, what do I do? A great question. So what we find is the playbook is a plan. It's the blueprint. It's a roadmap. But when we built our organization, the way we constructed the organization is we expected that many of you would not have the resources to do the job. So we help you do that. As a partner, we actually help you implement that. If you don't have the right resource in, let's say, marketing, we'll do it for you like we did with AdExchange. If you don't have anybody helping with business development and partnerships, we'll step in and help you do that too. So it's really important to get the job done. At the end of the day, what I figured out after growing and running many companies is a no excuses mentality. So when you want to be successful, you don't want excuses, you want results. Okay, let's see if there's any additional questions before we close off. Okay, that's good. And this is one of the questions. This is another question that was asked earlier. Does this methodology apply to small companies as well? And the answer is yes. So it really does. When we created these best practices and the operating model for growth, we have had wonderful opportunity to apply to large public companies. We've also applied it to mid-size companies that want to scale and go global. And we've also applied it to startups and early stage companies where strategy is really important. You get strategy right, then you need to accelerate the execution model after that. For a lot of companies, though, if you're a mid-stage company, it's about execution. You've got a strategy, but you're not getting the results or the scale that you need to. So this is another great place to come into. And then if you're a large company, I've worked at some large companies like Dun& Bradstreet and Oracle, for instance. There's always a lot of white space. There's always new initiatives. There's new product launches. There's new teams. There's reorganizations. And you can think of it as a company within a company. And that's where you really need to have the right model in place also. Okay, so get strategic about your goals. And also, for those of you that are joining us today, on Thursday, this Thursday, we're going to have another webinar hosted by myself and Craig Remy. And we're going to be talking about how to significantly boost your sales team performance. So we're going to be actually demonstrating what we call the one source solution and talking about how that's going to help you boost your sales performance, because a lot of times the challenges most executives have is sales performance is uneven. And what you really want to do is you want to have consistent performance across every contributor that you have on your sales team. So join us for that. That would be fantastic if you could do that. And then here's our contact information. So here's my email address. Here's Craig's. You're welcome to call us at our office or visit our website. And what I'd like to say is, on behalf of myself, Craig, and the entire team that we have, Dale, and the many contributors we have on our team today, I'd like to thank you for joining us for today's webinar about how to create your revenue acceleration playbook, the blueprint, the roadmap for your success. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.